Goodbye! It's Mundo Friday, just fooling around. All around the world, people like stories about so-called fools. People who do silly, ridiculous things that make you think, how can anybody be that dumb? But are these fools really dumb? Or are they actually wiser than everybody else? Take Mulla Nasruddin. A mullah is a judge and religious teacher, a very wise, learned man. But Mulla Nasruddin is known throughout the Middle East for his very silly behavior. So, which is he? Wise or foolish? You decide. Riding a donkey backwards, the wise and foolish tales of Mulla Nasruddin, retold by Sean Taylor and the Kayal Feeder, illustrated by Shirin Adil. This is a collection of very short stories about Nasruddin's very different way of doing things. For example, here's the first story in the book. It's called Whose Move? One afternoon, a robber broke into Mulla Nasruddin's house. The robber stole everything he could carry. He took a carpet, he took the best cooking pot, he took a stool, he took the mullah's favorite cushion. Then he walked away. Nasruddin came home just as the robber was leaving. The robber didn't see him, and Nasruddin decided not to shout or say anything. Instead, he followed the robber down the road. He followed him around the back of a tea house. He followed him all the way to the other side of the village. Then, when the robber arrived at his own house, Nasruddin followed him inside. As the robber put down the stool and things, Mulla Nasruddin got into a bed. "What are you doing?" asked the robber. "My wife and family will be joining us in the morning," Nasruddin told him. Then he pulled up a blanket, and he pretended to go to sleep. "What do you mean?" asked the thief. "Well," Nasruddin replied, "I thought we were moving to your house." Now, does Nasruddin really not know what was happening? Or was he trying to teach the robber a lesson? Makes you think. All right. How about this story? Have you ever been confused by dimes and nickels? Nickels are worth 5 cents and dimes are worth 10 cents. But dimes are physically much smaller than nickels. Something that wouldn't come naturally to you, it's just something you have to learn. But here's what Mulla Nasruddin did, and you tell me who here really knew what they were doing. It's called silver and gold. Mulla Nasruddin had no money, so he went to the marketplace to beg for coins. He sat in the shade near a shop owned by a rich carpet seller. The carpet seller found it strange that Mulla Nasruddin, who was famous for being clever, was begging outside his shop. It made him wonder if the mullah was really so clever after all. So he came up with a trick. He went over to Nasruddin and held out 2 coins. "You could take whichever one you want," he said. One was a small gold coin. The other was a silver coin, which was bigger, but was worth 10 times less. So it would be like a dime compared to $1. Nasruddin took the big silver coin. The shopkeeper laughed because this was such a foolish thing to do. So the next day he invited some friends to watch, and he repeated the trick. Nasruddin took the big silver coin again. Soon the whole town had heard this story. Lots of people offered a small gold coin and a big silver coin to Nasruddin, and they laughed every time Nasruddin took the big silver coin. A friend grew tired of seeing the mullah being laughed at, so he said to him, "Nasruddin, when they offer you 2 coins, you should choose the small gold one. It's worth 10 times more than the big silver one." "Thank you for your advice," replied Nasruddin, "but I don't agree. You see, if I choose the gold coin, everyone would stop giving me money." What do you think? Do you know Mulla is an Arabic word? In Turkey, they call Nasruddin Hoca Nasruddin instead. But it means the same thing, as does Afandi, which is his title further east. And that's just in Islamic countries. The foolish wise man has traveled even farther away and changed his name entirely. Take a look at the story The Umbrella in Mulla Nasruddin's book. The Umbrella. Look at the table of contents. The Umbrella. A girl saw Mulla Nasruddin walking through the rain. He was carrying an umbrella, but he wasn't using it. "Mulla," called the girl, "it's raining. Why don't you use that umbrella?" "It's broken," Nasruddin replied. "It's useless." "Then why did you bring it with you?" asked the girl. "Well," said Nasruddin, "I didn't think it was going to rain." Now read this one. Okay. Oh. This one is also called The Umbrella. Mundo and Itzik, who lived in the same shtetl or village, went out for a walk. One carried an umbrella, the other didn't. Suddenly it started to rain. "Quick," said Mendel, "open your umbrella." "It won't help," answered Itzik. "What do you mean? It will keep us dry." "It's no use. The umbrella is full of holes." "Then why in heaven did you bring it along?" asked Mendel. "I didn't think it was going to rain," replied Itzik. This is in a book called Kibitzers and Fools, Tales My Zayda Told Me, by Simms Taback. It's another book of silly little stories, but it says here that these stories are Yiddish. Jewish and Islamic culture both started in the Middle East, so they have very similar cultures. But many centuries ago, many Jews moved northward into Eastern Europe, and there developed a language and culture that combined aspects of their past and present homes called Yiddish. Yiddish is a language full of words that are fun to say. It has lots of words to describe different kinds of fools. Schmiels, schmazels, mendricks, midges, schnurks, schnorrers, schlubs, paskudniks, nudniks, meshugglers, klutzes, kibitzers, kalikas. I'm a klutz. That means a person who's physically awkward, doesn't it? Yes, many Yiddish words are now also used in English because they so perfectly fit the things they mean. The Yiddish are so fond of fool stories that not only are there all these different words for different kinds of fools, but they also tell stories about a whole village full of fools. Helm! The last story in this book is about Helm. It's called The Rabbi is So Smart, or How Helm Got Bigger. Could you imagine a village filled with nibbishers, smidges, and schlemels? Well, the town of Helm was such a place. Go figure. All the fools lived in one village, and the rabbi, you ask, well, he was no genius either. But if you asked a Helmer, or a citizen of Helm, what he or she thought of the rabbi, you would hear the same refrain. Rabbi is so smart. No matter what the question, he always has an answer. So, Rabbi, we have too many he-goats and not enough she-goats, so what should we do? Simple, said the rabbi. Call all the he-goats she-goats and all the she-goats he-goats. Now you have plenty of she-goats. Of course, Rabbi, thank you. You are so smart. Rabbi, which is more important, the sun or the moon? Oh, certainly the moon, replied the rabbi. The sun shines only during the day when it is already light anyway. Tell me, Rabbi. It's so cold outside. What should I do? Shiver, answered the rabbi. You see how the rabbi is so smart, agreed all the villagers. In time, Helm, which was at the foot of a mountain, became too crowded. There was no room to build even one more house. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, children, and grandchildren all lived together in the same house. Sometimes the cows and goats lived in the house with them. Soon the chickens had moved in too. Oi, Vezmir! Or may God help us, cried the Helmers. They were fed up, so the villagers all went together to complain to the rabbi. He would have an answer to their problem. Rabbi, the town of Helm is too crowded and too small. You can hardly walk without bumping into someone. Our houses are so crowded and noisy we can't sleep, we can't eat, there's no room even to sit. It is making us mishuggah. What should we do? The rabbi thought about this for quite a while, at least until his head started to hurt. Then he had an idea. We have to push away the mountain to make more room, he announced. So the next morning, all the people of Helm gathered in front of the mountain. Now, let's all push together, ordered the elders. The whole town pushed against the mountain. They pushed and pushed for hours. It got to be noon. The midday sun was hot, and they began to sweat. They removed their jackets and overcoats, laid them on the ground, and continued to push on the mountain. In the meantime, while the villagers were pushing on the mountain, 3 gonifs, robbers, wandered by and stole all their clothing. The villagers pushed and pushed until they were exhausted. Eventually, they decided to rest and turned around to see how far they had pushed the mountain. They looked this way and that, and could not see where they put down their jackets and overcoats. The rabbi will know where our clothing is, said one of the Nebishers. Yes, yes, and they all ran to the rabbi and told him what had happened. Mazel tov, exclaimed the rabbi. You pushed the mountain so far that you can no longer see your own clothing. And that's how the little town of Helm got bigger. Now, there is an actual real place called Helm in Poland. I don't think the people in the real Helm are really that silly, are they? No, probably not everyone there is foolish. It's just a funny joke. Many other places around the world have a similar reputation to Helm. In different cultures, there are different towns. Say, Schilda in Germany, Kampen in the Netherlands, Kukurkov in Bohemia, Simperk in Moravia, Södertälje in Sweden, Mols in Denmark, Gotham in England. Wait, some say the people of Gotham were only pretending to be fools to trick the king. There's a whole collection of tales about the wise men of Gotham, and the original tale is usually just called The Wise Men of Gotham. But this retelling of it is called something else, a phrase you might recognize, April Fool. It's retold by Mary Blount Christian, with pictures by Diane Dawson. Seth liked to daydream. Look at his outfit. Kinda looks like a court jester, too. A fool, you would say. Seth liked to daydream. He told his dreams to the village children. The other grown-ups called him Seth the Dreamer. They said he did nothing useful. Dreams cannot shoe horses, the blacksmith said. Dreams cannot fill empty stomachs, the baker said. Dreams cannot light the darkness, said the candle maker. Dreams cannot make money, the tax collector said. But Seth the Dreamer just smiled. It was the last day of March. Seth sat telling a dream to the children. Suddenly he stopped. He saw a horse on a far-off hill. Strangers were coming. One rider held the king's flag. The villagers were excited. They'd never seen King John before. King John stopped for rest. The flag man rode up to meet the people. The king will look around your town tomorrow, he said. If he likes what he sees, he will build a house here.
He will come to hunt and fish all the time. This is a great honor for your town." Then he rode off. The farmer said, "Some honor. King John visited my brother's town once. Now it's part of the king's highway. It's crowded with noisy strangers. There are too many horses. It's not safe to cross the street. You could be robbed or run over." Seth nodded. "Where the king rides, the land becomes a public road. King John will take whatever land he wants." "Well, this is terrible," the tax collector said. "Public roads means travelers, and that means more work for me." "Thieves follow travelers," the sheriff of Gotham said. "The town will not be safe and peaceful anymore." The game warden said, "Who would dare catch a bigger fish than the king? We'll have to settle for only the small fish." "If the king stays here, so will his horses," the blacksmith said. "I will not have time to shoe our own horses anymore." "I will be busy baking his bread," the baker said. "You will have to bake your own bread if he stays here. And make your own candles," the candlemaker said. "You'll have to grow your own grain too," said the farmer, "because the king will take most of my grain." "What about our children?" the baker's wife asked. "Our sons will join his army. Our daughters will marry as soldiers," the blacksmith's wife. "All our children will be gone," the game warden's wife cried. "Let's run," the baker said. "Let's fight," the blacksmith said. "Let's not let him in," the farmer said. "King John has a terrible temper," said Seth. "He might cut off your heads. Which of you will dare tell the king he cannot come here?" "Look," he said. "The king is already angry." He pointed to where the king was camped. The king was having a temper tantrum. He kicked the flagman, he stomped the ground, he shouted and waved his fists in the air, then he kicked his tent until it fell apart. The farmer moaned. "The blacksmith is right, we must fight for our lives." The blacksmith cried, "Though the baker is right, we must run." Seth raised his hand. "Wait," he cried. "Maybe there is a way we can save our town and our heads too." "But how can we do that?" the blacksmith asked. Seth the dreamer just smiled. "Maybe I can dream up a way." On the first day of April, King John rode into Gotham. No one came out to greet him. No one cheered for him. The king was angry. His face grew red. Then the king rode by a farm, and his anger turned into surprise. The farmer struggled to pull his plow through the field. His ox walked behind the plow. "What a fool," the king said. "The ox should pull and you should walk behind." The farmer bowed. He hid his smile from the king. "Why, that is so much easier," he said. "How clever you are, King John." The king rode past the river. The game warden carried a bucket of fish. One by one, he threw the fish into the river. "I'm drowning these stupid things," he said to the king. "They won't play games with me." "What a fool," the king said. "Fish cannot play games, and they do not drown neither." The game warden bowed his thanks. The king rolled on. He came to the bakery. The baker and the candlemaker stood on the roof. The sheriff stood on the ground. They pulled and tugged and pushed on a mule. They tried to get the mule up on the roof. The mule brayed and kicked and would not budge at all. "Why are you trying to get the mule on the roof?" the king asked. The baker bowed. "The roof leaks, sire. We must patch the holes." "What does that have to do with the mule?" the king asked. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "The mule's carrying our tools, sire. What good are tools to us if they're not on the roof?" "What fools you are!" the king cried. "The mule has more sense than you do." The baker's wife and her son sat in the garden. The baker's wife picked a flower and gave it to her son. Her son tore off all the petals and put the stem in a vase. The king rode past the blacksmith's wife. She screamed and cried and pounded on the high chair, and her daughter fed her way. The king rode past the game warden's wife. She fried eggs in their shells. Are they all fools? The king said. Does anyone in Gotham have good sense? We have good sense, said the king. He pulled up a bucket of water from the well. The tax collector looked at the bucket and nodded. Then Seth threw the water back into the well. What are you doing that makes good sense? Asked the king. We want to see if we can pull up the same water more than once, Seth said. You are fools too, the king said. How can you know the water is the same? That's easy, said Seth. See here? We marked the first bucket with an X, and we've pulled it up every time. King rode on to the blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith greeted him. Shoe your horse, kind king? At last, King John cried. Someone who is not a fool. The blacksmith brought out 4 pretty little slippers. These shoes will look very nice on your horse, the blacksmith said. Fools! The king yelled. You are all fools! The king rode back to his soldiers. I cannot cut off the people's heads just because they're fools, he said. But I do not want to live with them. The king and his men left to find another town. The blacksmith went back to shoeing his horses. The baker went back to baking his bread. The farmer went back to planting his corn. The tax collector went back to counting his money. The baker's wife went back to digging in her garden. The blacksmith's wife went back to feeding her child. Everything was the same as it had been before the king came. Except sometimes everyone stopped work. They sat with the children and Seth, the dreamer. Tell us again, they begged him. Tell us how you dreamed up the first April Fools. The end. Now, who was the fool in that story? The whole town pretended that they were fools, but at the beginning of the story, they were calling Seth a fool for dreaming so much. But he was the one who came up with a smart idea. What kind of seemingly nonsensical great ideas can you come up with? People may say they're nuts. People may call you foolish. But you know, could really be something really smart.